In the summer of 1947, flames ravaged Bar Harbor, Maine. Opulent estates that had endured for generations went up in smoke. Longtime summer residents witnessed their grand properties reduced to ashes. Come dawn, a substantial chunk of Gilded Age opulence had been wiped out. That blaze obliterated a key element of America's affluent heritage. Yet it wasn't the sole culprit behind the vanishing of these lavish retreats. Stretching from Massachusetts down to Florida, the Atlantic seaboard once boasted Gilded Age mansions that could match the splendor of Newport or Fifth Avenue. Residences constructed by the Rockefellers, Roosevelts, and tycoons of the rails. Seasonal getaways where the nation's elite convened. Coastal enclaves more selective than any Manhattan social circle. Today, nearly all have faded away, torn down, destroyed by fire, or so overlooked that even experts have trouble recalling them. This narrative uncovers those vanished grand homes, the hidden gems absent from travel guides, structures that embodied American influence every bit as profoundly as the Breakers or Marble House, yet survived mainly through yellowed images and land deeds. If these explorations into Gilded Age prominence and design captivate you, give a thumbs up and hit subscribe. Your backing keeps me digging into and producing such tales. Drop your thoughts in the comments if you've got any. 12 states, 12 overlooked realms. We'll start at the roots of America's inherited wealth, the disappeared mansions of Boston's Commonwealth Avenue. Beacon Hill and Back Bay in Boston still echo whispers of established fortunes. However, the most imposing Gilded Age residences, the true showstoppers of the city, have all but vanished. Back in the 1890s, Commonwealth Avenue featured a row of majestic homes that turned heads from out-of-town New York visitors. Blocks of stone-clad exteriors gleamed impressively. Lavish ballrooms hosted sophisticated gatherings, private exhibit spaces brimmed with fine art. This boulevard served as the spot where newly minted industrial riches sought entry into Boston's elite circles. It drew in clans eager to cement their status within the city's upper echelon. The Vanderbilts had ties to the region. Kin from the renowned Newport line apparently kept a foothold in Boston's trendiest districts at the time. The aim remained consistent: convert business success into approval from Boston's long-standing elite. But the social dynamics in Boston differed sharply from New York's hustle. The venerable Brahmin clans, families with surnames like Lowell and Cabot, prosperous since the colonial era, might grudgingly accept fresh industrial wealth, but seldom welcomed it wholeheartedly. Commonwealth Avenue turned into a costly arena where new money tested its chances of gaining a standing usually reserved for those with deep ancestral roots. Isabella Stewart Gardner emerged as one of the street's most intriguing inhabitants prior to erecting her iconic museum. Her residence entertained a mix of artists, thinkers, and titled Europeans in ways that shocked the city's straight-laced crowd. Her soirees blended free-spirited creatives with the stuffy elite, sparking delightful uproar that delighted Gardner while dismaying her straight-laced peers. The Sears clan, with their burgeoning department store empire, erected impressive dwellings nearby. The Ames kin, flush with earnings from rails and factories, claimed key addresses. Every such home demanded a hefty household crew. Each stood as a bold investment by a family, aiming to secure societal rank via sheer architectural magnificence. By the dawn of the 1900s, the trend grew evident. These weren't mere dwellings. They were lavish gambles on inclusion that frequently fell short of the owner's expectations. The demolitions kicked off around the 1940s. The Second World War rendered such sprawling properties tough to run and upkeep without ample help. Owners offloaded artworks and unloaded the lots. Builders snapped up the grounds for pennies on the dollar compared to build costs, raised the buildings, and threw up multifamily units. The bulk of Commonwealth Avenue's Gilded Age treasures met this fate. A handful shifted to public or nonprofit hands. Certain frontages endured thanks to buys from schools or groups. But the clustered extravagance, the full lineup of competing private estates vying for prestige, dissolved entirely. Strolling Commonwealth Avenue these days, you'll spot remnants, salvaged portals, sporadic, majestic doorways that outlasted the structures they fronted. Yet the overall grandeur has evaporated. The vibe of a whole thoroughfare devoted to business magnates angling for old line approval lingers solely in historical snapshots. Boston's Gilded Age didn't slip away quietly. It got deliberately dismantled, supplanted by an urban landscape that favored its revolutionary past over the awkward era when corporate wealth muscled into Brahmin domains. What's left consists of snaps in research collections, glimpses of a roadway that once vied with Fifth Avenue, now shrunk to ornamental touches on condo blocks. The overlooked segment of Boston's Gilded Age, bulldozed and paved over, lingers mostly in the minds of structure scholars poring over ancient deeds. Commonwealth Avenue formerly symbolized the pinnacle of boss-vast ambition, marked the site in its prime. Yet today's passers-by seldom grasp the grandeur that once dominated it. The Rockefellers' haven in Connecticut. Greenwich, Connecticut, now symbolizes hedge fund fortunes and modern palatial homes. However, during the late 1800s, it represented a stark contrast. This was the destination for America's richest dynasty when they sought seclusion. John D. Rockefeller, Sr., rejected Newport outright. It felt too exposed, too rivalrous, with photographers lurking beyond the estate entrances. Instead, he craved seclusion, expansive grounds where his relatives could thrive, free from endless scrutiny, a sanctuary shielded from the spectacle of affluence for public amusement. He explored options along Connecticut's shorelines. Records of particular estates and precise sites tend to fade in archives, which aligned perfectly with the Rockefellers' wishes. These weren't ostentatious venues crafted for snapshots and chatter. Rather, they fashioned hidden enclaves intended to evade notice entirely. The Rockefellers' method for acquiring Connecticut properties entailed buying acreage, constructing with restraint relative to Gilded Age extravagance, and then extending developments over time. Thick foliage, secured entrances, residences positioned far from thoroughfares, all engineered for seclusion over ostentation. Other affluent clans observed and emulated the model. Certain Connecticut regions evolved into refuges for riches, prioritizing anonymity above acclaim. These domains arose to stay out of sight. Architectural flair took a backseat to the seclusion it enabled. True triumph lay in evading any mention of one's holdings. Real accomplishment involved upholding total discretion amid immense fortune. This forged a Gilded Age terrain profoundly unlike Newport's. While Newport's villas vied for visual supremacy, Connecticut's holdings vied to elude detection. The clans vacationing there embraced that preference. No travel guides cataloged the sites, no social dispatches chronicled the events. The elite arrived and departed sans publicity. The tactic endured for generations. These Connecticut bolt holes stayed largely obscure relative to Newport or Bar Harbor, yet seclusion couldn't safeguard the properties indefinitely. Automobiles transformed the landscape. Remote escapes turned into feasible excursions from New York City. Property prices fluctuated. The rationale for upholding vast private domains close to a more reachable metropolis started to crumble. Numerous original Rockefeller holdings were ultimately gifted, divested, or repurposed. Some morphed into public green spaces, others fragmented into smaller parcels. Precise particulars often remain hazy, given how adept the families were at dodging scrutiny throughout the estate's confidential eras. In the present day, Greenwich and nearby locales retain echoes of this Gilded Age essence, though they're tougher to pinpoint than Newport's blatant chateaus. Surviving estates frequently undergo such alterations or divisions that unearthing their roots demands deep investigation. The builders achieved their privacy goals so thoroughly that few echoes linger. The Rockefeller philosophy toward Gilded Age opulence, favoring withdrawal over exhibition, yielded domains that scarcely anyone recalls. These Connecticut assets emerged as the antithesis of Newport. One spot established its identity via structural rivalry and societal pomp, the other via intentional invisibility. Both tactics, in the end, fell short of safeguarding their realms unchanged. Newport's villas evolved into exhibits, their intimate roles obsolete. Connecticut's properties dissolved into segmentation and renewal, their isolation pierced by suburban sprawl. What these Connecticut hideaways embodied, the chance to harbor colossal wealth in utter isolation, turned out as fleeting as Newport's dream of perpetual social preeminence. Divergent paths converged on identical outcomes. The Gilded Age proved unsustainable, no matter the approach. The estates faded not through sensational ruin, but because those beyond the inner circles barely knew of their existence initially. Discretion in the Gilded Age equated to historical amnesia. The dwellings vanished subtly, imparting scant remnants beyond sporadic notations in deeds and kin documents. Seal Harbor, the enduring Rockefeller outpost. Bar Harbor claims the spotlight. The blaze, the vanished villas, the gripping tale of Gilded Age riches raised. Yet 10 miles southward in Seal Harbor, a contrasting narrative unfolded. The Rockefellers established a presence there as well. John D. Rockefeller Jr., heir to Standard Oil's legacy and its long-term steward, selected Seal Harbor with intent. He pursued the same ideals his father chased in Connecticut: seclusion, mastery, separation from societal demands. The primary residence in Seal Harbor bore the name The Eyrie. Perched on Mount Desert Island, it commanded views of the harbor and the Atlantic expanse. Rockefeller acquired terrain there during the early 1900s and devoted years to shaping it precisely as he envisioned. The primary residence was impressive, yet far from extravagant by Gilded Age measures. The grounds demanded ongoing care and extensive carriage paths, constructed precisely to Rockefeller's designs, twisted through meticulously tended wild areas. This place transcended the notion of a mere seasonal getaway like those in Bar Harbor. There, grand homes vied for prominence, staging lavish gatherings and showcasing status through social spectacle. In contrast, Seal Harbor thrived on its lack of rivalry. Rockefeller constructed his ideal retreat without concern for others' opinions, largely because he had deliberately minimized nearby inhabitants. Over time, Seal Harbor evolved into a Rockefeller family enclave. Relatives erected their own dwellings in proximity. By acquiring vast tracts, the family fashioned a secluded domain all their own. Such seclusion was deliberate and vigilantly upheld. As Bar Harbor buzzed with elite clans hosting soirees and yacht races, Seal Harbor stayed serene, regulated, and largely off-limits to intruders. Rockefeller's carriage routes turned into a personal fixation. He poured resources into their construction and upkeep, forming a system that let him traverse the island's woodlands and shores via horse-drawn vehicles, free from cars or throngs. These paths were engineered for endurance. Crafted with precise techniques and fine details, they exemplified the zenith of Gilded Age opulence. Rockefeller wielded the means to alter a whole environment for his own enjoyment. At first, the carriage roads held no communal value. They came into being solely so one individual could travel through stunning scenery undisturbed. In 1947, when flames ravaged Mount Desert Island, the blaze approached Seal Harbor but spared most Rockefeller holdings. The durable stone paths and strategic land stewardship likely aided in safeguarding the region. While Bar Harbor's denser, more outgoing Gilded Age enclave went up in smoke, Seal Harbor's profoundly secluded Rockefeller haven endured mostly unscathed. This endurance highlighted a striking juxtaposition. Bar Harbor's outward-facing mansions disappeared. Seal Harbor's intentionally insular realms persisted, shielded by the very remoteness that had shaped them initially. Eventually, Rockefeller Jr. gifted much of his Mount Desert Island holdings to establish Acadia National Park. Paths once crafted for exclusive leisure transformed into shared facilities. The estate itself was later torn down, yet the terrain he had molded endured. It shifted from a personal sanctuary to a communal asset. Seal Harbor now embodies one of the Gilded Age's most effective vanishing feats. The fortune was immense. The alterations to the surroundings proved enduring. However, the exclusive sphere Rockefeller forged faded so thoroughly that visitors cruising through Acadia seldom recognize they're immersing in one person's bequeathed dream, shared publicly only posthumously. The carriage routes stand as Rockefeller's most prominent mark in the locale. Countless miles of expertly designed trails, arched stone spans, and picturesque viewpoints, all initially erected for a single family's peaceful equestrian outings. Nowadays, they draw crowds for trekking and cycling, with many users unaware they're treading the remnants of America's most reclusive Gilded Age hideaway. Seal Harbor demonstrated that Gilded Age riches could persist by shunning rivalry and ostentation. Bar Harbor's grouped properties perished in unison. Seal Harbor's detached estates endured through self-imposed separation, forming independent havens, reliant not on societal acclaim or peers. Yet, endurance didn't equate to upholding the initial intent. The estate has vanished. Many of Seal Harbor's other Gilded Age buildings have undergone major alterations or removal. What lingers is the framework. Carriage paths and stone arches, the skeleton of a personal dominion that outlived the residences it supported. Hyde Park and the Roosevelt heritage, the Hudson Valley marked America's inaugural bastion of established wealth. Well before Newport or Palm Beach, affluent New Yorkers raised properties along the waterway north of Manhattan. By the Gilded Age, these domains had persisted for generations, held by lineages viewing themselves as near aristocratic in the American vein. The Roosevelts numbered among them. Franklin Roosevelt's kin had owned Hudson Valley acres since the colonial era. The Roosevelt property at Hyde Park, called Springwood, differed markedly from the lavish new money chateaus rising elsewhere in the Gilded Age. This was ancestral land, representing long-standing affluence striving to hold its ground amid the transformation of prosperity by industrial barons. Springwood began as a fairly unassuming dwelling acquired in the mid-1800s. Franklin's father enlarged it gradually, yet with moderation, avoiding the bold magnificence typical of Gilded Age extravagance in other spots. The outcome was noteworthy but subdued relative to adjacent VA. The Vanderbilt estates evoked a sense of established wealth, one that implied long-standing affluence without flaunting recent riches. Franklin Roosevelt came of age in such an environment. The social fabric of Hyde Park rested on principles that occasionally perplexed the tycoons of the Gilded Age. Ancestry held immense weight. Subtlety outweighed extravagance. Long-established clans aimed to endure indefinitely. Funds were essential, yet openly addressing them was deemed rather tasteless. Such norms bred friction amid the Gilded Age's height. The Vanderbilts erected vast manor houses along the Hudson Valley. Their industrial riches funded opulent chateaus that overshadowed the ancestral dwellings. This emerging prosperity was bolder, more conspicuous, and boldly magnificent. It rendered the traditional estates seem nearly understated in contrast. The Roosevelts handled this dynamic with precision. They enlarged Springwood gradually, upholding an aura of moderation even as the residence expanded considerably. They organized events but labeled them differently from lavish soirees. They maintained households, but on a scale smaller than those of the neighboring Vanderbilts or Astors. Each decision was deliberate, aimed at conveying that their fortune carried greater antiquity, authenticity, and elegance than the manufacturing empires crafting spectacles throughout the region. Franklin Roosevelt's ascent in politics imbued Springwood with deeper significance. As he approached the White House, the estate evolved from a mere personal sanctuary into a broader emblem. It embodied a particular ideal of U.S. governance. The notion that the nation boasted lineages innately suited to lead, driven not by personal drive, but by a legacy of duty. Following Roosevelt's passing, Eleanor gifted Springwood to the United States government. It transformed into a national historic landmark, safeguarded much as the family had maintained it. This was exceptional. Numerous Gilded Age properties were razed or profoundly altered. Springwood remained a snapshot of its era, shielded by Roosevelt's enduring legacy. A visit to Springwood nowadays offers a glimpse into the refined image that patrician Hudson Valley households sought to uphold in the Gilded Age. The dwelling is cozy yet not overpowering, striking yet not daunting, affluent yet discreetly so. It captures precisely the demeanor those venerable families wished to project, intact well after their society had transformed beyond recognition. The Hudson Valley harbors many comparable holdings, sites held by lineages tracing back to colonial times, augmented in the Gilded Age, yet consistently designed to appear less grandiose than the burgeoning industrial fortresses. Several now function as museums or public venues. A few stay under family stewardship. Nearly all deviate markedly from their Gilded Age configurations. What defined the Hudson Valley in that period was the clash between established and nascent fortunes. The manufacturing wealth frequently surpassed in magnitude, but the hereditary elites possessed unchallenged social standing. This rivalry manifested in design choices and conduct, with both factions vying to demonstrate the preeminence of their affluence. In certain respects, the patricians yielded ground. The sheer scale of industrial riches proved insurmountable through decorum and heritage by themselves. Yet the old guard outlived numerous upstarts in another fashion. Their more restrained properties adapted more readily to shifting financial realities. Residences like Springwood proved maintainable, whereas the sprawling Vanderbilt domains grew prohibitively costly. Consequently, the Hudson Valley's terrain today features preserved old money abodes that occasionally outshine the once dominant Gilded Age extravaganzas. The tactic of deliberate understatement, which appeared somewhat protective at the Gilded Age's zenith, ultimately demonstrated greater viability over time. Springwood endures as a testament to a distinct philosophy of American prosperity. Not the grandest or most striking, but one of the most resilient. Patrician wealth that persisted in part by declining to vie under the Gilded Age's dictated conditions. Linwood Hall stands as a memorial to sorrow. Philadelphia's main line earned its name not solely from rail routes, it signified influence. The Pennsylvania Railroad's primary corridor extended westward from the city through territory that developed into some of the nation's richest enclaves. Residents there typically enjoyed profound ties to the railroad, urban commerce, and the broader industrial landscape. The Widener clan figured prominently in this circle. Peter A.B. Widener amassed his wealth first in trolleys, then broadened into transportation networks and public services. By 1900, he ranked among the country's richest individuals and evidently desired a residence commensurate with his prominence. He commissioned Linwood Hall in Elkins Park along the main line, with work commencing in the late 1890s. The designer was Horace Trumbauer, who subsequently created the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Upon completion, the mansion numbered among the grandest private homes in the U.S. Accounts differ on the precise tally of rooms, but its expanse was undeniable regardless. It included a grand ballroom suited for major assemblies, an art gallery purpose-built to showcase what evolved into one of the nation's premier private assemblages. Widener stocked that space with iconic masterpieces from artists like Rembrandt, Vermeer, and Raphael. He snapped up key acquisitions, rivaling major museums and securing pieces fit for the planet's top cultural hubs. Linwood Hall's holdings gained renown among academics and dedicated enthusiasts. The residence featured a French neoclassical design, with its limestone facade and balanced proportions evoking old-world royal heritage while flaunting U.S. industrial prowess. Its grandeur was unmatched by typical measures. Linwood Hall embodied monumental accomplishment in every detail. Yet nowadays, it's chiefly recalled for sorrow. In April 1912, Peter Widener's son George and grandson Harry secured tickets on a vessel heading back from Europe. They had been traveling overseas, and the family's artistic holdings were expanding. That vessel was the Titanic. George and Harry Widener perished in the disaster. Peter Widener, architect of a vast business realm and curator of a treasure-filled manor, proved powerless to protect his son or grandson. The tragedy shattered the clan. Linwood Hall, erected to honor triumphs, grew linked to mourning. Widener kept acquiring pieces in the years that followed, though a shift had occurred. He started pondering the collection's enduring fate. Upon his death in 1915, his estate outlined directives for the artworks. A large portion ultimately transferred to the National Gallery of Art in Washington. Linwood Hall's gems thus opened to public view. The property itself confronted an ambiguous destiny, stripped of its core intent. Widener's descendants upheld it briefly, yet its vastness rendered it impractical as an everyday home. The artworks had departed. The lineage that once animated the halls had shrunk. By mid-century, Linwood Hall changed ownership. It passed through various hands across subsequent decades. For a time, it functioned as an educational facility. It lingered empty for prolonged stretches. The surrounding district transformed profoundly. The main line's opulent Gilded Age vibe waned. Linwood Hall emerged as a quirky outlier, too immense for straightforward upkeep, too costly to raise, too vital historically to dismiss outright. Presently, Linwood Hall endures, albeit in decline. Decades of neglected repairs have taken a toll. Advocacy organizations have strived to rescue it, facing immense financial hurdles. This once vaulted repository of America's elite artistic heirlooms now stands as an emblem of how even the grandest Gilded Age mansions faltered without sustained mission and deep funding. The Widener narrative highlights the Gilded Age's inherent vulnerability. The fortunes were genuine, the assemblages were remarkable, the dwellings rose to formidable benchmarks, but their longevity hinged on persistent prosperity and familial dedication. Lose those, and even estates as robust as Linwood Hall turned from assets into burdens. Philadelphia's main line persists as an affluent enclave, but the lavish Gilded Age properties that shaped it have largely vanished or evolved dramatically. Linwood Hall's gradual decay exemplifies a wider trend. Such grand homes often failed to adjust to shifting financial landscapes. Lineages couldn't invariably sustain them through eras. The fiscal equations altered too sharply. What endures of Widener's artistic legacy lies mostly in the collection he amassed. Those masterpieces now grace museum walls, admired by countless patrons and carefully conserved. The structure he commissioned to shelter them battles for endurance, drawing visitors chiefly drawn to heritage conservation or design chronicles. Linwood Hall embodies a distinct Gilded Age belief in endurance. Erect an edifice solid enough, and it will persist. Stock it with valuables precious enough, and they will endure safeguarding. Generate riches profound enough, and they will flow onward. Widener embraced such notions, and the manor serves as intricate proof of their halfway validity and inherent bounds. The Jersey Shore has lost track of its presidential getaways. Today's Jersey Shore evokes seasonal crowds and coastal resorts. But during the late 1800s, a coastal band from Long Branch heading south carried a wholly distinct meaning. It signified executive escapes and lavish seasonal retreats, havens where affluent clans fled the sweltering warmth in the era prior to air conditioning, rendering urban life tolerable throughout the seasons. Several presidents vacationed in Long Branch during summer. The roster apparently encompassed Grant, Hayes, Garfield, Arthur, Harrison, and more. The locale earned an unofficial tag as a kind of seasonal seat of power at intervals. Presidential presence drew clout in its wake. Prosperous households constructed villas in proximity. The waterfront blossomed with imposing residences. Deal, situated just below Long Branch, rose in popularity within elite social spheres. Households possessing considerable vast fortunes accumulated in that region. References to the Guggenheim family show up in the local archives. The Whitney name does too. Such industrial riches paved the way for acquiring prime seaside lots. Residences were constructed to capture ocean winds and offer pleasant seasonal escapes. For the majority of owners, these weren't full-time homes, but temporary retreats occupied just a few months each year, with staff on hand in summer, typically opening in June and shutting down by September. Even so, the outlay was considerable. These properties received expert design and construction equipped with the latest conveniences of the era. They were crafted to endure and fulfill their role effectively. Social activities revolved around the shoreline and exclusive clubs alike. Households passed days relaxing by the sea, with lazy afternoons giving way to nighttime events and soirees. Summer carried a laid-back vibe, yet rigid class divisions and pecking orders persisted beneath the easygoing facade. The rise of automobiles dramatically altered this dynamic. As vehicles rendered the Jersey Shore more reachable for everyday folks on holiday, the sense of seclusion started to erode. Shores once kept somewhat secluded turned busier and more open to all. Communities that once hosted presidents and affluent seasonal dwellers shifted toward serving wider visitor crowds. Numerous clans who had erected grand compounds there sought alternative summer spots. By the 1920s, the Jersey Shore's opulent era was undergoing noticeable transformation. Certain properties changed hands through sales, while others repurposed for new functions. A handful stayed under family control, though they increasingly seemed mismatched. With the coastline opening up to the masses, ties to high-profile figures like presidents waned. The aura of elite status faded away. An enclave once reserved for the privileged evolved into yet another ordinary coastal stretch. Today, nearly all those pioneering Gilded Age mansions have vanished, torn down and supplanted by contemporary builds across the years. The surviving ones, if any, have undergone such extensive alterations that uncovering their initial designs demands diligent study. The Jersey Shore's lavish past lingers mostly in faded images and archival documents, snapshots of a fleeting society that dissolved almost entirely. This tale from the Jersey Shore reveals the fragility of Gilded Age privilege amid evolving conditions. The lineages who developed those sites evidently believed their riches would perpetually secure seclusion and societal standing. They probably overlooked how innovations like cars and shifting markets would expose their havens to far larger groups. They designed for an age when remoteness and cost imposed inherent divides among classes. Once those divides crumbled, the grand homes forfeited their core intent. The shift from elite sanctuary to popular getaway unfolded swiftly on the timeline of history. Over just a few generations, the terrain transformed utterly. The prosperous households rarely resisted the tide. Instead, they relocated to fresher, more secluded enclaves, distant from urban hubs and throngs. The Jersey Shore narrative underscores the ephemeral quality of Gilded Age elite landscapes. A spot could command peak allure in one era and lose it sharply in the next. Structures raised in vogue times, no matter their scale, found it hard to retain relevance after the cultural backdrop evaporated. Strolling neighborhoods like Deal nowadays reveals scant evidence of that gilded epoch, maybe a rare vintage dwelling, often heavily reworked. Road signs that subtly evoke bygone vibes, but the built environment has mostly yielded to growth unlinked to its origins. The Jersey Shore's overlooked Gilded Age abodes faded away, not via sudden ruin, but through slow obsolescence. As the societal framework that birthed them evolved, these dwellings forfeited clear alternative roles. They met the wrecking ball or reinvention, since preserving them absent their foundational prestige proved hard to rationalize. Evergreen, Baltimore's rail legacy. In Gilded Age, Baltimore, railroads wove deeply into the city's fabric. The Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, among the nation's earliest key routes, spawned wealth that molded the urban landscape for decades. The Garrett clan's stake in the B&O afforded them lasting sway in Baltimore through much of the 1800s. John Work Garrett steered the line amid the Civil War's tangled maneuvers in politics. He surfaced with bolstered stature and notable riches. His heir, Robert Garrett, took over and amplified both into a fortune-rivaling major holdings in New York or Philadelphia. The Garrett residence in Baltimore, called Evergreen, started as an acquisition in the 1870s. Robert Garrett enlarged it progressively, appending extensions, erecting a playhouse, assembling a repository for uncommon volumes and documents. The estate expanded to house a burgeoning trove of artwork, and the household's communal evergreen emerged as a key hub in Baltimore's social scene. The Garrett family organized lavish dinners, artistic gatherings, and events that blended leisure with professional networking. The residence brimmed with artwork and decor that mirrored their refined tastes and economic stature. Yet, Evergreen served practical roles too. Robert Garrett evidently leveraged the property for railway operations, convening with financiers and leaders there. The library doubled as an office and a display of elegance. Overall, the estate balanced entertainment and utility. The Garretts embodied Baltimore's distinctive path to prosperity during the Gilded Age. They prioritized cultural and civic advancement more than ostentatious excess, unlike certain New York clans. Robert Garrett played a major role in bolstering Johns Hopkins University. He backed various artistic organizations. He viewed his riches as a tool for enhancing Baltimore's cultural framework. Consequently, Evergreen transcended its status as a mere family dwelling. Its artworks contributed to wider educational goals. Scholars accessed the library freely. The property functioned partly like a public venue even as it remained a private home. Following Robert Garrett's passing in 1905, his heirs took over the estate and his commitment to cultural stewardship. They preserved the mansion and expanded its holdings. Evergreen continued to influence Baltimore's cultural landscape well beyond the family's personal network. Such endurance set it apart from typical Gilded Age properties. Most faded soon after their founder's era, lasting only a generation or so. Evergreen endured thanks to its gradual shift toward institutional relevance. The Garretts effectively intertwined personal fortune with enduring communal value. In the early 1940s, the final family occupant gifted Evergreen, along with its treasures, to Johns Hopkins University. It evolved into a museum and scholarly hub. The artifacts stayed mostly unaltered. The library kept aiding researchers. The structure gained a formal mission while echoing its foundational uses. Nowadays, Evergreen thrives as a museum, one of the finest surviving Gilded Age homes. Its preservation stems not from sheer size or initial cost, but from the family's vision of purposes reaching further than self-indulgence. The Garretts recognized that riches devoted solely to familial enjoyment tend to dissipate. Assets invested in or tied to organizations can persist far longer. Many of Baltimore's prominent railway residences have disappeared or shifted to unrelated roles. Evergreen persisted because it was crafted early to serve beyond a single household. The Garrett strategy, emphasizing cultural heritage alongside status, proved more enduring than mere spectacle. Touring Evergreen offers a distinct experience compared to other restored Gilded Age sites. The architecture doesn't dominate through magnitude alone. It captivates via depth, thoughtfully amassed collections, purposeful design that went beyond flaunting opulence. The Garrett estate illustrates what the Gilded Age could have yielded more frequently had families embraced such expansive accountability. Evergreen avoided obscurity because it never devolved into isolated privacy, rendering it obsolete once family ties loosened. In Delaware, Winterthur epitomizes the DuPont legacy. The clan's chemical empire molded the state so profoundly that its imprint lingers across the terrain even now. Winterthur captures that legacy in a unique way. Its roots trace to the early 1800s, though Henry Francis DuPont, who took over in the late 1920s, elevated it to extraordinary heights. He overhauled the manor extensively, yet avoided crafting a standard Gilded Age extravaganza. Instead, Henry Francis sought accommodations for his growing assortment of American decorative arts. The resulting residence was immense, boasting more than 100 rooms, yet its layout prioritized utility over showmanship. Spaces transformed into era-specific vignettes, displaying furnishings and artifacts from key periods in U.S. history. This vision highlighted the DuPonts' entrenched stability by the mid-20th century. With their status unassailable, Henry Francis pursued prestige through culture, positioning himself as a pivotal patron of American aesthetics rather than a mere fortunate descendant. Winterthur became his enduring passion. He devoted years to sourcing pieces, curating interiors, and perfecting details. The grounds landscapes underwent comparable meticulous care. The domain spanned a vast area. The expansive grounds at Winterthur were crafted in a naturalistic manner, with no element left to chance. Every detail received meticulous planning. This scrutiny even applied to the estate's operational dynamics. Winterthur served not merely as Henry Francis DuPont's residence, but also as a partial research facility. During his lifetime, academics frequented the property to examine the holdings. The residence doubled as both a personal dwelling and an educational asset. This blended identity characterized Winterthur from its formative years. Henry Francis evidently constructed it with longevity in mind. By the early 1950s, when he officially transferred the property to function as a museum, the shift occurred with minimal upheaval. The structure had long incorporated institutional features. The official pivot solidified an evolution already underway. Nowadays, Winterthur stands as one of the United States' leading museums for decorative arts. Its holdings are vast and noteworthy. The era-specific rooms receive diligent upkeep. Researchers rely on the dedicated library. The landscapes draw crowds year-round. Many of Henry Francis's apparent aspirations have come to fruition. Yet Winterthur also illustrates how the DuPont fortune diverged from typical Gilded Age riches. The family's chemical enterprise provided steady, intergenerational stability. The DuPonts' prosperity faced little real uncertainty. Such assurance likely fostered unique goals, like amassing treasures gradually across decades and developing properties intended for enduring roles. The Brandywine Valley, home to Winterthur, hosts several DuPont properties: Nemours, Hagley, Longwood Gardens. These reflect distinct family lineages. All were erected on a grand scale. Over time, each has evolved into a public venue or museum. The DuPont strategy for handling Gilded Age and subsequent era wealth contrasted sharply with clans whose assets fluctuated wildly. Strolling through Winterthur evokes a sense of gathered wisdom beyond mere affluence. The artifacts hold great value, yet their display prioritizes instruction. The building is imposing, but its proportions enhance the exhibits rather than mere vanity. All elements convey deliberate patience and forward-looking vision. This mindset ensured Winterthur avoided obscurity, as it never functioned solely as an exclusive retreat. Henry Francis intended it for communal benefit, safeguarding and showcasing American decorative arts. While meeting familial requirements, those demands encompassed forging an enduring cultural heritage. Winterthur endured due to its deliberate design for persistence. The collections underwent thorough cataloging. The property's finances were arranged for sustainability. Following Henry Francis's passing in the late 1960s, the organization proceeded seamlessly. The DuPont properties in Delaware exemplify the Gilded Age's most effective conversion of personal fortunes into lasting public treasures. The kin seem to recognize that residences by themselves seldom persist through multiple generations. However, dwellings tailored for defined communal roles, adequately funded and thoughtfully organized, might endure forever. Richmond's Gilded Age equilibrium. In the Gilded Age, Richmond, Virginia, straddled contrasting realms. As the former Confederate hub, it grappled with defeat and ruin long after the conflict. At the same time, it was reconstructing itself, amassing fresh capital through tobacco and fabric industries, aspiring to emerge as a contemporary manufacturing hub while clinging to long-standing Southern customs. Monument Avenue, laid out in the 1890s, emerged as Richmond's premier Gilded Age housing project. The thoroughfare featured statues honoring Confederate figures at key crossroads. Lavish dwellings lined the promenade, erected by clans profiting from tobacco, textiles, and rail ventures. The avenue embodied Richmond's effort to harmonize conflicting drives. The statues paid tribute to the Confederate legacy. The opulent homes showcased emerging industrial prosperity. The lineages establishing roots there sought to honor Southern roots while engaging in broader national commerce. This tension yielded distinctive architectural traits. The residences were impressive, though typically smaller than their northern urban counterparts. Richmond's elite possessed considerable means, but seldom rivaled the grandest northern tycoons. Their response involved highlighting heritage, sophistication, and elegance over sheer magnitude. The estates accommodated events blending commerce with strategic societal maneuvering. Northern tobacco purchasers mingled with Virginia clans bearing historic titles, occasionally facing waning resources. Lawmakers contended with post-Reconstruction challenges. Each assembly required navigating commercial imperatives alongside cultural norms. This delicate interplay shaped much of Richmond's Gilded Age. The locale required Northern capital to fuel expansion. Yet embracing such funding entailed adopting Northern commercial norms, and at times their cultural perspectives. The clans developing Monument Avenue aimed to contemporize Richmond, managed to thrive financially during that era while upholding societal frameworks that the affluence from the North occasionally challenged. This strain proved unsustainable in the long run. By the dawn of the 20th century, the city's unique Gilded Age vibe had started to evolve. Fortunes from tobacco merged into bigger enterprises. Certain long-standing Virginia lineages parted with their urban holdings. The grand residences along Monument Avenue gradually turned into multi-unit dwellings, public facilities, and various other applications. Numerous Gilded Age homes on Monument Avenue underwent major alterations or repurposing. The neighborhood's once dominant residential feel has mostly yielded to institutional and business-oriented roles. Architecturally, the avenue still commands admiration, yet its initial societal role has faded away. In recent years, Monument Avenue has sparked heated discussions centered on the Confederate statues that defined its creation and now serve as flashpoints in conversations about historical recollection and symbolic representation in public spaces. The elegant homes bordering it often retain their structural integrity, though they've shifted to entirely new roles far from what their creators envisioned. Richmond's Gilded Age properties embody a form of opulence that hesitated between clinging to the past and leaping into the future. These dwellings occupied a tense in-between space, striving to celebrate Southern roots even as they adopted the rise of industrial enterprise, working to uphold particular social norms amid broader national markets that began to dismiss them. Ultimately, Richmond's story revealed that a robust local identity couldn't endure the forces of nationwide economic blending without profound shifts. The elite households of the city mostly opted for assimilation, which led to their Gilded Age abodes slowly shedding the precise cultural significance they once symbolized. The surviving structures are frequently stunning, but now fulfill objectives distant from their foundational intent. Monument Avenue endures as a testament to the effort to craft a Gilded Age rooted in Southern sensibilities, an endeavor that yielded striking designs but failed to uphold its core social ideals. Biltmore and Asheville's evolution. Biltmore requires no elaborate preamble. The sprawling residence of George Vanderbilt in Asheville, North Carolina, stands as the nation's grandest private dwelling, a French Renaissance-style chateau nestled amid the Appalachian Mountains. It boasts around 250 rooms, along with expansive gardens crafted by Frederick Law Olmsted. The design came from Richard Morris Hunt. Biltmore's very existence is common knowledge. Far less recalled are the motivations behind George Vanderbilt's choice of location, the nature of Asheville prior to his arrival, and the profound ways his initiative reshaped the area. In the 1880s, Asheville functioned as a modest hill town, renowned chiefly for therapeutic retreats. Its elevation and weather were viewed as advantageous for lung conditions. Visitors arrived in pursuit of crisp highland breezes for wellness, lodging in simple guest houses and unpretentious inns. The community revolved around practical health services rather than opulence or recreation. George Vanderbilt showed up in the late 1880s, accompanying his mother who sought relief in the elevated air. As the youngest offspring of William Henry Vanderbilt, he came into considerable fortune, but lacked the defined positions his elder siblings had secured. They possessed the lavish New York estates and seaside retreats in Newport. George sought to carve out his own legacy. He evidently drew motivation from Asheville's surrounding peaks. The scenery evoked the grand European domains he had toured. Property there cost comparatively little. The regional workforce craved jobs. He envisioned constructing an unparalleled American retreat, a personal domain of a magnitude unseen in the country. Erecting Biltmore spanned multiple years, employing thousands of laborers. Supplies arrived from global sources and distant U.S. locales. Hunt conceived a residence that would dazzle anywhere in Europe and astonish amid America's rugged backcountry. Olmsted shaped cultivated woodlands and laid out terrains spanning thousands of acres. The undertaking revolutionized the area's finances and repositioned Asheville on an entirely new trajectory. What George Vanderbilt created went beyond a mere dwelling. It formed a comprehensive domain, mostly independent. Farms supplied provisions, woodlands underwent expert oversight, a settlement accommodated the staff. The grounds functioned nearly like an autonomous realm, with George holding sway over this self-contained domain. Asheville's dynamic with Biltmore carried inherent complexities right from the start. The property delivered plentiful jobs and visibility, yet it also underscored the vast divide between Vanderbilt-level riches and the everyday struggles of locals. The mansion was breathtaking, but it perpetually highlighted stark disparities. Area residents toiled on the grounds without ever residing within. They upkept a fortress they could never access as visitors. George Vanderbilt is said to have shown greater awareness than certain other Gilded Age successors. He introduced woodland management techniques that shaped wider environmental ideas. He backed low academic establishments. It seems he attempted to deploy his fortune with a degree of accountability. Yet the core dynamic stayed stratified. A single individual controlled vast expanses of land and a grand mansion. All others either labored under him or gained peripheral advantages from his existence. Biltmore remained perpetually incomplete. George continued constructing and altering it right up until his passing in 1914. Following that, his spouse, Edith, began admitting fee-paying guests to the residence and grounds in 1930, seeking funds to sustain the property amid the economic downturn. This choice ultimately preserved Biltmore, though it profoundly altered its essence. Nowadays, Biltmore draws more than 1 million guests each year. It ranks as one of the nation's top historic homes in terms of visitors. The grounds and associated ventures produce considerable income. Descendants of the Vanderbilts retain ownership, operating it primarily as a key sightseeing spot instead of a personal dwelling. Biltmore's allure goes beyond mere size. It's the story of its endurance that captivates. The structure proved too immense for simple teardown, too vital to neglect, and too costly to uphold solely as a secluded home. Visitor access offered the fix. What began as an emblem of Gilded Age personal riches evolved into something open to the wider public, sustained via profit-driven efforts. Strolling through Biltmore in the present day involves a meticulously orchestrated visit. The interiors are remarkable. The artifacts reach the caliber of a museum's holdings, yet guests follow set routes, encounter selected exhibits, and grasp the estate's history via explanations tailored for broad crowds. The once secluded manor has morphed into a communal display. The city of Asheville underwent a profound shift due to Biltmore's existence and persistence. The property turned the area into a hub for tourists. People arrived to tour Vanderbilt's opulent abode and stumbled upon the scenic highlands. The community expanded significantly thanks to Biltmore's pull, with new lodgings and eateries emerging to cater to sightseers. From a modest health retreat, it blossomed into a vacation haven, in large part because George Vanderbilt chose to construct there. However, the pre-Biltmore era has mostly faded from memory. The unassuming hill settlement, the humble plots Vanderbilt acquired to form his domain, the terrain prior to Olmsted's redesign into a crafted natural haven. All that has been largely wiped away by Biltmore's creation, supplanted by orchestrated splendor and regulated encounters. Biltmore embodies in certain respects the Gilded Age's fullest expression and its most thorough reinvention. George Vanderbilt realized his vision with little concession. The residence endures mostly unchanged, perhaps even in superior state compared to his occupancy. Yet its survival comes as an exhibit space and commercial enterprise, not the deeply secluded realm he envisioned. The grand edifice persists. The seclusion has vanished entirely. Jekyll Island, the nation's premier private enclave. Along the Georgia shoreline lies an islet that once epitomized the zenith of amassed American affluence and influence. Acquired by a consortium of tycoons in the late 1880s, Jekyll Island served as a seasonal haven for lineages whose collective assets were astonishing, even amid Gilded Age extravagance. Admission to the Jekyll Island Club demanded more than mere riches. It necessitated endorsements from current affiliates and ratification by the oversight body. Lineage and societal standing weighed as heavily as capital. Over time, the roster featured Vanderbilts, Rockefellers, Morgans, Pulitzers, Goulds, a veritable catalog of era-defining elites. The islet operated in total seclusion under the club's full dominion. Access required ferrying from the continent. While the club offered communal amenities, affiliates had the option to erect personal bungalows dispersed throughout, varying from cozy abodes to impressive retreats, each reflecting a clan's unique take on leisure escapes. Life at Jekyll Island was thoughtfully arranged to accommodate preferences. Participants could mingle or withdraw at will. Pursuits like shooting game, angling, equestrian outings, golfing, and more were available. Events for socializing occurred, but joining was voluntary. The setting was crafted to enable the elite to unwind free from the gaze of the general populace and the upkeep of properties exposed to public view. This seclusion transcended mere leisure. Jekyll Island doubled as a discreet forum for the realm's top bankers and magnates to convene casually, debate matters impacting the broader economy, and exchange ideas shielded from outside eyes. A notable instance unfolded in 1910, where discussions purportedly paved the way for the Federal Reserve's establishment. Crucial monetary strategies, evidently took shape during these off-the-record Jekyll Island sessions. The enclave functioned much like a noble sanctuary, echoing Europe's elite domains but adapted for America. The clans involved evidently viewed themselves as inherent stewards, individuals whose fortunes and status endowed them with the aptitude and duty to shape Jekyll Island, served as a secluded haven where this elite circle convened, unwound, and occasionally reached pivotal choices that impacted countless individuals unaware of the isle's very existence. The residences erected by these insiders ranged widely in grandeur. Certain ones stayed fairly unpretentious. In contrast, estates akin to those owned by the Rockefellers stood out as notably expansive. Yet, even the grander structures carried a relaxed vibe when measured against the opulence of Fifth Avenue or Newport. These spots functioned as sanctuaries, ideal for fleeing the rigors of more visible societal obligations. Jekyll Island's elite status remained unchallenged and boldly embraced. The purpose here lay not in rivalries among affluent lineages. Rather, it fostered total detachment from the wider world. The exclusive enclave aimed to offer America's elite a realm free from mingling with those beyond their financial sphere. Service personnel resided apart, tending to the grounds while respecting the seclusion of residents. Such profound seclusion proved unsustainable over time. The Great Depression heightened scrutiny on amassed fortunes, stirring political unrest. World War II rendered such privileged hideaways tone-deaf amid widespread hardship. By the mid-1940s, the Isle's viability as a members-only retreat had unmistakably faded. In 1947, the group transferred ownership to the state of Georgia. Officials repurposed Jekyll Island as an open-access preserve and heritage landmark. The central hall and numerous dwellings were safeguarded. What once barred the public now welcomed all, flipping its creator's vision on its head. Strolling Jekyll Island nowadays evokes a visit to the echoes of a massed influence. The edifices endure, meticulously upheld as relics of the past. The terrain retains traces of its crafted origins, though its significance has utterly reversed. Symbols of peak elitism now embody inclusive entry to communal heritage. This once isolated outpost, emblematic of division, has evolved into a teaching tool on Gilded Age disparities. Guests can explore the homes. The main building now doubles as exhibit area and gathering spot. Travelers might even lodge on grounds where Rockefellers and Vanderbilts once mingled in utter seclusion. The shift feels profound. Jekyll Island's era as an elite domain has vanished. As a communal heritage destination, it flourishes. At its zenith, Jekyll Island epitomized the Gilded Age's boldest bid to carve out an utterly insulated domain for the prosperous. The clans who developed it secured true seclusion amid their vast riches. They fashioned a setting for daily life and dealings shielded from any outsider's gaze. Yet this triumph harbored its own flaws. The stark divide between Jekyll Island's insiders and the broader nation grew harder to defend as economic divides ignited backlash. The tighter the barriers, the sharper it mirrored the excesses that detractors decried in Gilded Age affluence. Shifting from exclusive society to open grounds marks a full about-face. Beyond the surrender of private holdings, it signals the downfall of the societal framework enabling Jekyll Island. The notion that vast riches warranted a superior segregated haven faltered under 20th century upheavals. Jekyll Island endures as a testament to that evolution. Its structures testify to what Gilded Age fortunes wrought in pursuit of total seclusion. Their present communal role underscores how such barriers proved untenable. The pinnacle escape for America's top tiers morphed into a state-run haven for all. This stands as maybe the ultimate twist in Gilded Age lore, the grand designs of Whitehall and Flagler in Florida. Florida's shift from rugged outpost to seasonal escape haven owed much to a single visionary. Henry Flagler, Rockefeller's Standard Oil ally and trusted colleague, spotted promise in the region's mild weather and sparse population. He extended rail lines along the shoreline, raised lavish inns at key points, and virtually invented a thriving cold-season leisure sector from scant foundations. Whitehall, Flagler's Palm Beach estate, finished in the early 1900s, embodied his ambitions in full bloom. Said to boast 73 rooms crafted by the firm Carrere and Hastings, it featured marble finishes, exquisite furnishings, and a commanding presence that proclaimed Flagler's rank among the nation's elite. Yet Whitehall transcended mere home. It doubled as promotion. Flagler erected it in part to showcase Florida's promise, luring affluent East Coast clans by proving Palm Beach could deliver seasonal splendor matching Europe's finest or long-standing U.S. retreats. The estate affirmed that Florida offered more than balmy air. It could cultivate sophistication and grace, fitting for those with deep pockets and discerning palates. The approach evidently succeeded. Prosperous households trailed Flagler to Palm Beach. They raised their own properties, typically less vast than Whitehall, yet impressive. The locale emerged as a winter paradise, headquarters for the elite circles of New York and Philadelphia society. The social season typically spanned from January to March, offering an intense burst of events in a balmy environment. Flagler's prior efforts had paved the essential foundation. In St. Augustine, he constructed the Ponce de Leon Hotel during the late 1880s. This expansive edifice aimed to persuade visitors that Florida possessed a rich heritage and sophistication worth exploring. Blending Spanish Renaissance design features with up-to-date amenities, it evoked a sense of timeless elegance alongside modern indulgence. The Ponce de Leon drew affluent vacationers and those pursuing mild climates for therapeutic benefits. It positioned St. Augustine as a premier winter getaway before Flagler turned his attention southward toward Palm Beach and Miami. The establishment exemplified his strategy: erect grand edifices, deliver superior hospitality, and promote Florida as a prime spot for affluent visitors' time and resources. Flagler persistently pushed his influence further south. His rail lines ultimately arrived in Miami and extended into the Keys. Every expansion unlocked fresh areas. Each emerging settlement emerged as a prospective vacation hub. Flagler went beyond mere construction in Florida. He effectively invented Florida as an alluring idea in the public mind, converting wild lands into chic retreats via strategic building projects and persistent promotion. And Whitehall captured that evolution perfectly. The estate rose on an island that had been mostly deserted just years before. Flagler's involvement single-handedly turned Palm Beach into a resort enclave. The island thrived as an upscale haven simply because he envisioned it that way. Yet, Flagler's Florida dominion carried inherent risks. It relied on persistent economic disparities. Winter escapes demanded an elite stratum affluent enough to afford several homes and dedicate seasons to leisurely escapes. As that group shrank as a share of society in the 20th century, the core framework grew increasingly difficult to uphold. Flagler passed away in 1913. His widow resided at Whitehall for additional years before parting with the estate. The residence briefly operated as a hotel, then remained empty at times. By the 1950s, Whitehall faced the threat of teardown. The property that once showcased Florida's opulent promise appeared fated for ruin. Rescue arrived via familial action. Flagler's granddaughter acquired Whitehall and facilitated its conversion into a museum. The home welcomed public visitors in 1960, evolving from secluded manor to cultural landmark. These days, the Flagler Museum thrives within Whitehall, recounting Florida's growth in the Gilded Age's seasonal elite. Strolling through Whitehall today reveals Flagler's dream intact, yet profoundly altered. The interiors stay mostly preserved, decorated to mirror their look from his era. However, the surroundings have shifted entirely. The mansion was crafted for personal habitation and close gatherings among affluent peers. Now, hordes of sightseers flock there yearly, engaging with the site via guided excursions and informative displays. St. Augustine's Ponce de Leon Hotel took another route. Following years as a lodging, it integrated into Flagler College in the late 1960s. Learners now inhabit quarters meant for prosperous seasonal guests. The majestic communal spaces buzz with everyday academic movement. Student housing occupies what were once lavish guest rooms. The shift feels total and a touch paradoxical. Flagler's Florida creations represented Gilded Age growth at its boldest. He constructed more than isolated properties. He forged a full network for winter elites, from rail systems to lodgings to his own residence. His foresight dramatically remolded the state, birthing a visitor-driven economy that continues to define Florida's character. Still, the secluded elite aspect of that foresight couldn't endure unchanged. Whitehall as a personal home endured only briefly. The Ponce de Leon as a high-end hotel persisted longer, but ultimately proved financially unviable in that capacity. The properties and accommodations Flagler developed for Gilded Age winter crowds all evolved into exhibits, learning centers, or faced demolition. Palm Beach endured but underwent major changes. The island retains its affluence and serves as a seasonal draw for the prosperous. Yet it diverges from Flagler's original Palm Beach. The societal framework he established, rooted in notions of an enduring idle elite with rotating homes, has mostly vanished. Today's Palm Beach thrives on property markets and current fortunes, not Gilded Age customs. Flagler's enduring mark is Florida as a lasting winter allure that flourishes. But the particular realm he crafted, secluded manners and selective lodgings for a select few, faded within a generation or two after his passing. His foundational networks and core advancements outlasted the grand homes and insulated social spheres they supported. Whitehall, the opulent residence, stands as a testament to Flagler's triumphs and the boundaries of his grand designs. It demonstrates that Florida was capable of embracing the splendor of Gilded Age opulence in its most lavish form. Yet, its evolution into a public museum reveals that such magnificence could not stay confined to private hands alone. The estate endures by opening itself to all. The dream persists only by forsaking its initial intent of exclusivity. Across the stretch from Massachusetts to Florida, the overlooked Gilded Age estates along the East Coast adhere to a recurring theme. Vast riches, assured of their endurance, erected properties meant to endure through the ages. But in mere years, the majority faded away or morphed into something unrecognizable. Those that persisted often did so by evolving into roles their original architects never envisioned. Institutions like museums, educational campuses, green spaces, or communal heritage landmarks. What began as secluded havens turned into welcoming venues. Isolated sanctuaries welcomed the masses. To thrive, they had to relinquish the very functions they were crafted for. Evidently, the Gilded Age failed to foresee how rapidly the societal and financial foundations upholding these private domains would evolve. The world wars rendered such lavish properties nearly impossible to operate and upkeep due to staffing shortages. The Great Depression turned amassed fortunes into targets of public ire. Evolving taxation policies complicated the preservation of inherited wealth over time. The rise of the automobile eroded barriers of distance, undermining certain retreats merely by making them reachable to everyone. The lineages behind these grand homes appeared to believe their prosperity was unbreakable, their status unassailable, and their dwellings timeless. They were mostly mistaken. In just a couple of generations, countless estates dissolved, reorganized, or splintered among many descendants. Class systems crumbled or reshaped entirely. Residences faced destruction, gifting, or repurposing in ways their founders might deem baffling. Today, only remnants linger. Select preserved properties sustained by massive continuous costs and organizational backing. Archival images capturing structures that have since vanished. Deeds recording tenures that culminated in razing or alteration. The tangible realm forged by the Gilded Age has mostly evaporated, though its influence echoes in surprising guises. Lands repurposed as public areas, such as Rockefeller's scenic pathways or the trails on Jekyll Island safeguarding natural beauty. Dwellings now functioning as exhibit halls. They educate on affluence and its constraints. Enduring legacies beyond personal use, like Flagler's role in Florida's growth or Biltmore's cultivated woodlands. These repurposed echoes now fulfill communal roles, ones their originators probably never foresaw. The neglected Gilded Age estates of the East Coast embody American riches at their zenith and their inability to secure lasting legacy. The wealth was genuine. The edifices were solid. The aspirations were bold. Yet scarcely any withstood the upheavals of 20th century American life and fiscal shifts. Strolling amid the survivors now, touring exhibit spaces that were once fiercely guarded residences, wandering communal paths that served as private drives, one encounters proof that the Gilded Age's faith in eternity was deeply flawed. These strongholds couldn't adjust to shifting realities. The clans behind them frequently couldn't sustain them over time. The fiscal and cultural equations altered too profoundly and swiftly. Perhaps the most striking aspect isn't the disappearance of so many properties. It's the presumption that they would endure. The Gilded Age constructed as if its era stretched forever, seemingly overlooking past precedents where amassed power and family empires inevitably met upheaval. These overlooked estates aren't outliers. They stem logically from erecting personal empires within a democracy in flux. The East Coast terrain still carries traces of Gilded Age drive, but chiefly through voids, vacant parcels where grand homes once rose, fragmented lands that were once unified domains, public facilities now filling grounds meant for solitary households. The terrain recalls what conventional narratives occasionally overlook. These weren't mere dwellings. They symbolized affluence's capacity to forge enduring tributes. Nearly all such declarations turned out false. The Gilded Age's most extravagant estates have vanished. The less lavish ones often persist by transforming utterly. Those in between, too burdensome for private care, yet not noteworthy enough for public safeguarding, erase themselves most thoroughly. Thanks for joining this dive into the East Coast's lost Gilded Age estates. If this trip through obscured building legacies has captivated you, hit subscribe for additional tales on America's erased properties and the dynasties that raised them.